Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to my video game reviews. In today's video, we should be continuing our coverage of the Kirby Series with the 16th spin-off Kirby game and the 32nd Kirby game overall, Team Kirby Clash Deluxe, or as it's known in Japan, Everyone Kirby Hunter Z, which, is pretty obviously based off of the sub-game from the last game reviewed, as well as Dragon Ball Z. Does this game end up being a solid experience, growing upon what was established in the last game, or does it end up being mostly pointless affair that does little but waste your time? Well, in order to find that out, let us dive into the game itself, starting with that developmental history. Alright, so we actually know extremely little about this game's development. Obviously, it should go without saying that it started in Kirby Planet Robobot, which I've reviewed before, so check that out if you want to learn more. And the team considered that Team Kirby Clash had a lot of potential and wanted to give it its own release. Yeah, that's it. Even looking into the files of the game show little worth talking about. As for people who worked on it, there was Shinya Kumazaki as general producer, Tatsumi Kimishiwa as executive producer, and Jun Ishikawa as the lead sound guy. In the end of the day, development seemingly went smoothly, with the game getting released for the Nintendo 3DS eShop only, first in North America on April 12, 2017, and then in Japan, Europe, and Australia on April 13th of the same year. It sold under 1 million copies and only got middling reviews. But does this reflect reality? Was it really that bad? Did it deserve this? Well, let us find out as we start discussing the game itself, starting with the story. Yes, really. Unlike the original sub-game for Kirby Planet Robobot and the previous 3DS eShop games, there's an actual story here, even if it is admittedly very simple, even by Kirby standards. Kirby wanders into the medieval Dream Kingdom, which is similar to Dreamland, but has some different aspects. The player meets Bandana Waddle Dee and Magolor somehow, who's in the shop square of the town. How Magolor got there would be explained in a future game, and so for now, let's just say he got drunk and wandered in here. We see Bandana Waddle Dee explain the situation as there are loads of dangerous monsters terrorizing the land, such as a giant Waddle Dee. I don't know why the two can't talk it out, but you, the player, alongside up to 3 other Kirby entities that exist for some reason, battle your way through various beasts threatening the region, including the likes of King Doo, Krako, Wispy Woods, and Pirate Bit, before encountering Taranza, who seems to be the malignant force behind it all. However, after his defeat, it's revealed that he's not the real cause behind all this, as he had been corrupted by the Black Mirror, a suspiciously similar entity to the Dimensional Mirror seen in Kirby Triple Deluxe, which I've reviewed before, that serves as a gateway between a Dream Kingdom and what I assume is meant to be some aspect of the Mirror World. This happened due to him trying to use it to bring back his beloved Queen Sectonia. And after his defeat, Landia, also corrupted, rallies the foes with, his former master having been defeated. However, after beating Landia, strange entities show up, such as parallel dimension equivalents of Susie and Landia, as well as Dark Tyranza, a corrupted dark mirror to Tyranza. But after his defeat, he calls upon the Black Mirror, who summons the real man behind it all, King D-Mind, an absurd combination of Shadow Deity and Dark Mind, who then proceeds to kill Tyranza for its failure. And this is a real death. We never see him again, really. After a long, grueling battle, Kirby beats him, trapping him in the mirror dimension by destroying the Black Mirror, which then frees Tyranza from his evil corruption and restores the peace of the Dream Kingdom. Overall, the story is pretty solid, and I liked seeing Tyranza suffering with grief from the events of Triple Deluxe and trying to work through it. Sure, it's not groundbreaking, and some of the little details seem odd, like why use the term parallel instead of, say, dark? Parallel Susie doesn't quite make as much sense as, say, dark Susie, but all are minor nitpicks. And now let's go on to arguably the most important aspect of any game, the gameplay, and see how that's handled. Alright, so on a basic level, the gameplay draws its baseline from Team Kirby Clash subgame from Planet Robobot, which I've reviewed before if you'd like to learn more, so I highly suggest you watch that video for more details on the basic gameplay controls seen here, as I'm going to try and focus more on the new stuff, but I will give a brief overview. The gameplay is effectively a mini RPG where up to 4 players can pick one of 4 classes. Sword Hero, who is the jack of all trades that can shield allies temporarily. Hammer Lord, who brings the largest amount of damage at the cost of being slower than Pimp Monk X. Beam Maid is a long distance mage that can attack enemies from far away, and if doing enough damage with the time attack, can pause time. Lastly is Dr. Healmore, which, true to the name, is a healer that can revive fallen friends without cost to his own health in the same way that other roles have to sacrifice. You will go with up to 3 other characters on quests, all of which are timed, of which there are far more than last time, with 42 in total. However, this new game introduces a number of new aspects. First up are heroic missions, which basically serve as these mini objectives handled by doing various tasks like defeating a certain foe or fulfilling certain requirements like no one dying or reaching a certain medal level. Medals are awarded based on how well you do, by the way. Pretty self-explanatory. And you can also get them by buying a certain number of gear. There's over 400 of these guys, but we'll talk about this stuff more towards the end of the video as it plays into the completion requirements of the game. But yeah, you heard the word buy show up in the last paragraph. And yes, there's now a shop manned by Magalore, where there are 4 shops subcategories to buy from. First up are the weapons, each of which is just a straight up upgrade from the last, so you always want to try and get the latest one if you can afford to. But also try to keep all the classes up to snuff, as if you only focus on one, the weakness of the other shall hold you back. So always remember to upgrade all of the classes. There's also a place to buy armor, which much like last time, there's always in your best interest to get the latest for all your classes. After a certain point, specifically beating Tyranza, you unlock the ability to upgrade your armor and weapons to a DX state. While yes, you can go out of your way to upgrade everything that is needed for a heroic mission, but in all honesty, just focus on doing that for the best of the best gears you want. It's not worth doing it for all of them, just because, for reasons we'll get to in a bit. But how do you upgrade such gear? Well, that plays into the rewards you get from beating a specific quest. You see, in addition to XP, there are now fragments, of which there are several variants. First are fire fragments, then there are water fragments, and light fragments. There is a 4th rare fragment variant called rare fragments that just sort of show up randomly in bubbles. They're kind of annoying to try and get, but I guess that's the point. Interestingly, though, the yield is doubled on certain days for certain fragments. Tuesdays increase your turnout of fire fragments, Fridays for light fragments, and Wednesdays for water fragments. Another way to increase the amount of fragments you get in terms of rates is the support item shop. This offers various upgrades applicable for only one fight, such as, attack potions to boost your attack for one quest, stamina potions that for one battle boost the health for a fight, and EXP orbs that double the EXP for 30 real life minutes. And that one lasts for multiple battles if you're fast enough. However, ignore all of those and focus on the codexes, which are a set of books that increase your fragment awards by up to 3% with the ultimate codexes each. There are also a Codex of Vigor, which ties into one of the main two additions of the gameplay that I think are bad. You see, Vigor is effectively a meter on how many quests you can go on for a period of time before you have to wait around for it to restore. Honestly, this just seems like an unnecessary pause in gameplay that just sort of breaks up the flow for no reason and was absent in the sub-game. There is another way you can restore vigor, which is to consume some of the main currency of the game, gem apples, which are the second edition that I think is not that great. Oh no, there's nothing wrong with currencies in an RPG, heaven forbid, and these do have several additional things such as, buying stuff, unlocking quests, recruiting adventurers, which we'll talk about in a bit, revive the player in case you lose, and get more time if you run out. However, the problem is not what they do, it's the quantity. You see, outside of the small handful you get by beating certain missions, you get a set amount each day or every 12 hours or so, though it's probably only going to be every day given how most people usually play these sorts of games. You see, the baseline is 5. Very little, and as you can tell, it will take months, if not years, to afford everything. But you might say, surely there is a way to upgrade this tree's output. And you'd be right, and the way you do so is a first in the series. Microtransactions, yay! Yeah, that malignant cancer did leak its way into even Kirby in the form of the fourth and final shop Magalore runs, where, much like a mobile game, you can give Nintendo real money for fake currency. Woo! Plus you have to buy at least 3,000 apples to max out the tree, which will cost you at bare minimum $29.98 to max out the tree. Admittedly, it's not that much, but still, there should be a way to upgrade it in-game. We shouldn't reward companies for such unethical practices, and given that the online service no longer works, you're no longer able to improve the daily gem apples, so you're basically neutered from being able to really play the game to its full potential, which is just an instance of how a lot of these things don't future-proof. There's also two whole aspects of gameplay that I think are worth discussing. First is the Adventure Bell, which, while the 3DS online service worked, would have let you get a Kirby inspired by another player. Or now that the service is gone, a randomly generated, boring adventurer that is much more in line with your levels and is thus not as much of a help. To the far right of the town, there's also a little password shrine where you can get goodies, at least before Nintendo services died out, so now it's pointless. There's also amiibo support. Scanning a Kirby Series amiibo gets you 20 random fragments. A Kirby character from Smash Bros. Series gets you 10, and lastly, all others only give you 5. You can only use 5 per day, but I'm sure it's very useful if you're trying to get certain upgrades. Overall, the gameplay is odd. In many cases, it's a big improvement from the last one, but in contrast, it's also held down by some really boneheaded decisions that prevent you from enjoying it now that the online services are gone. Now let's discuss the presentation of the game and see how that's held up, starting with the most obvious half, the graphics. Alright, so the graphics draw heavily from the last few games, but there's some stuff I think is worth talking about. Starting with the places you fight, Grasslands is a nice greens that is a solid design, if a bit generic. I do like the windmill trees though. There's also some dunes that are your typical desert, vaguely Middle Eastern region. Ruins that have these old structures set in a forest. There are these regions called volcanoes that are volcanic, kind of generic. Empyrean has a set of these sort of angelic backgrounds with abandoned ruins that indicate some ancient civilization. Lastly, the decisive battlefield has perhaps some of the most notable, with a bunch of like Eldritch abomination locations. Perhaps even more interesting are all the collectible armors and weapons. Sure, there's plenty of generic ones, but there's also some highlights. These include a unicorn sword, a sawfish, there's Dark Matter's blade, which is a reference to Dark Matter swordsman. I especially love the helmet comes in. There's a set of armor and sword inspired by Landia. The platinum armor of all four classes are fun and really are a reward to your dedication. There is also a bonus set of armor and sword based on Susie, but that was only available if you had Street Pass date from Planet Robobot, so that's basically dead. Luckily, Hammer is a allusion to the Japanese luck symbol, so you might be lucky. Wham Bammer is an allusion to Wham Bam Rock from Kirby Superstar and comes with a similarly inspired helmet. There is Dark Mind Hammer and helmet that are inspired by Dark Mind, an allusion to Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. The Mad Scientist Flask has a Haltman Company logo on the bottom. The Choo Choo Cap and Flask are allusions to Choo Choo, the pink octopus animal friend from Kirby Dream Land 3, which I've reviewed before. There is a Taranza-inspired flask and hat. A staff and hat inspired by Drossia and the magic paintbrush from Kirby Canvas Curse. And lastly, there's a set based off Magalore. Overall, the graphics here are solid, and much like the story, it's not, groundbreaking, but it's filled with that sort of Kirby charm that makes it better than it otherwise would be. Now let's go on to the second half of the presentation, the music, and see how well that is handled. Alright, so the game's OST consists largely of remixes from past games. The shop has a calm, rural remix of Magalore's theme. When interacting with the amiibo statue, you hear a remix of the Art Attack from Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards. The mini-boss theme from Kirby's Return to Dreamland gets a nice acoustic variant heard while fighting the likes of Waddle Dee, Mr. Frosty, King Dew, Gigant Edge, Balaki, Kibble Blade, and Bonkers. There's a very nice iteration of the Kirby Superstar boss fight, an orchestral variant of the Sphere Doomer's theme from Return to Dreamland, heard while fighting Greater Doomer. Pink Ball Activate gets a very energetic variant while you're fighting Parallel Landia. Taranza, the master of puppetry, a long-named theme shows up, and it sounds great. There's a remix of the Dark Meta Knight Appears theme, heard before challenging the final boss. Haltman Work Company theme also shows up. However, the two favorite returning themes, in my opinion, is Blazing Boss Battle, aka the main boss theme from Kirby's Return to Dreamlight, which sounds stellar here. And even better is the final boss theme, which is a variant of the Masked Deity theme, but with an additional aspect of the Dark Mind theme. Honestly, it really sounds great, jazzy in a badass way. The new themes are also fine, if a bit limited in number. Shrine of Passwords has a very Middle Eastern vibe, and it's kind of the weakest of them. It's honestly kind of bland. In contrast, the town theme sounds really peaceful and nice. The Ordeal theme, heard while fighting hard bosses, really gets you blood pumping to fight them. Overall, the OST is solid, if admittedly mostly returning tracks makes it maybe not the most memorable. Now let's go on to the enemies you shall face on this grand adventure. Alright, so unlike most games, the enemies of this game really only consist of one category bosses. Sure, one could mention the caterpillars and Gordos that can be dropped as wispy woods as common enemies, but they're not really fought by themselves, so I would barely count them as their own thing. Also, the hardest boss fights are called ordeals, but they're just harder fights. They're not really in their own category, as they would say. Starting with Colossal Waddle Dee, this large, slightly reddish variant of Waddle Dee is pretty pathetic. It can try to jump on you, it'll try and wiggle in place to try and hit you with it, which never will hit you, and will also try and just walk into you. The definition of a starter fight. He can also break the fourth wall by waving at the player. He's serviceable, but he's even easier than Wispy Wood, so it's not really worth talking about. Especially when you have four players. This Colossal Kaboo, who is a giant kaboo that can vanish and move around the arena. It's a bit harder than Waddle Dee, and you only fight him after dealing with a rematch from Colossal Waddle Dee, so it's maybe a little harder, but still extremely easy. Colossal Hothead is a third visually unoriginal fight against a larger variant of a common enemy. With only two attacks, he can either try and breathe fire at Kirby or shoot a fireball at him up to three at a time. Pretty pathetic, and is only hard to do due to having to be fought after you beat Colossal Waddle Dee and Kaboo first, so you're a little worn down. Mr. Frosty returns from last time, and it's basically the same, but a bit faster and can do a sort of icy rotation attack. King Doo shows up, and he's identical to his fight in Robobot, so overall solid. Gigant Edge is similarly unchanged outside of being a little faster. Kibble Blade is again mostly the same, but can toss out more boomerangs. Bonkers shows up, and his hammer attacks are much more elaborate and last longer. He generally has more health. Blocky is mostly unchanged, but his attacks can last longer, and he will turn invincible more often. Miasmoros returns and is identical to its fight in Planet Robobot, but with more health. Ice Dragon makes his first non-hologram return and functions much like his last appearance. He can shoot out ice and is honestly one of the most notable encounters. Telepathos returns and is frankly, of all the returning foes, probably the most changed. Not only does he teleport spam and swoop at Kirby, he will also fire orbs in various combinations, leading to a really cool fight. Last of the non-ordeal fights is the Greater Doomer, arguably the most original encounter in the game, and I love it. This guy will sweep at the player, using his glide attack. With energy bullet, he'll shoot out a set of purple orbs. Burning attack sees him set himself on fire and charge at the Kirby's. Dark Crush sees it emit a dark aura and will after a bit release 3 explosions. It's a tougher rematch, will be seen later in the game, and can, via orb saw, summon a bunch of orbs to rotate around the boss. Overall, a great encounter. Now let us go on to the ordeal bosses. Going on to the first of these is Krako, whose fight is essentially the same as Triple Deluxe, but has removed the more excessive area-altering attacks. It's a fair challenge. Wispy Wood's return is again largely the same as it is encountered in the original subgame, but now it can drop Gordos as well as apples. Pyribbit also returns and functions the same as his original subgame appearance, but does the sort of background attacks less commonly. Landia and Landia EX return identical to their old fights, just with a little more health. Taranza is the fourth ordeal, and for the first time fought directly. With Taranza Ball, he charges and shoots out a handful of dark orbs. With Taranza Web Hold, we'll see him flying to the background and try and capture one of the Kirbys in a net, which you can either then button mash or have the other players help you escape. If you escape, you'll stun Taranza for a bit, allowing you to do a little more damage. Super Taranza Ball sees him toss a huge bouncing ball that you will have to dodge. Taranza Burst sees him charge up for a short moment and blast an explosion 3 times. Super Taranza Blast has him fly into the center of the stage and release a huge large blast. Crystal Volley has him shoot 5 large gems at Kirby. Magic Field has him envelop himself in an energy shield and fly around trying to impact upon Kirby. Lastly is Tyranza Ball Ring, which sees him summon 8 orbs that surround himself like a ring and will eventually shoot at Kirby. Overall, a great encounter. Then we got Parallel Susie, whose fight is akin to the first phase of Susie in Planet Robobot. I do appreciate the darker coloration though, it makes her stand out. Then we got Parallel Landia, which is an even harder variant of Landia with a nice black and golden coloration and more health. Dark Tyranza is effectively a harder version of Tyranza who's faster and more aggressive, will shoot out more gems and more orbs. The new color scheme is inspired by the Japanese Joroso spider, Trichophilia clavata, so that's kind of neat. Perhaps the most notable is King D-Mind, which I absolutely loved and discussed in extreme detail in my every DDD boss fight ranked, so check that out if you'd like to learn more. But this really is the pinnacle of the DDD fights in the 2D games, with tons of absolutely engaging and diabolical attacks that overall lead to a very energetic and amazing final boss. Overall, a fitting ending to the game, even if the design is a bit ridiculous and forced. Now that we've discussed the mini enemies, let us wrap up this review with the completion requirements and my final thoughts. Alright, so technically speaking, this game has no true 100% completion measurements. The closest thing you have is a pair of screens you can get by completing all the missions and getting platinum medals on each stage. Sounds easy enough, right? Wrong. It is in fact impossible to actually 100% complete this, as several of the heroic quests are tied to services no longer available, such as bringing a online adventurer along on a quest, as well as the fact that you can no longer upgrade the tree, meaning that even trying to play this game makes it grind to a glacial pace. This sort of highlights a problem intrinsic to freemium games that are not future-proofed, and compounding it further is that it's never been re-released outside of the Nintendo 3DS eShop, so it is effectively impossible to play unless you already bought it, and even if you have, it's basically neutered. So even if you did try and, say, pirate it in some way, yo-ho-ho, fiddly-dee, for this reason, it is the sole Kirby game that I do not recommend unless you are a mad, dedicated Kirby fan, like myself, in which case you'll get an okay but extremely tedious experience that you'll never be able to complete. Luckily, it did set the foundations for a much superior game we shall be reviewing in the future. Anyway, this has been a shorter review, and I'm the Dark Master. If you liked the video, you liked it, but if you loved it, consider subscribing and sharing it around. Take care and have a wonderful day.